I just wanted to share some pictures. Earlier this year, I was in Utah, and as I was in Utah, visiting a few different churches and preaching, holding some different meetings there. One Sunday I was preaching for a friend of mine down there, and he put me up in a place close by. He put me up in a place called the 777 Ranch. Now, just in case you're curious, this is our other home. This is where we normally live. No, actually, it's not that at all. This is a place. It's called the 3 Sevens Ranch, and it's in a place called Farron, Utah. And there in Utah, this ranch is set up. It's a Christian camp, and the whole setup is that it's a horse riding camp. They teach young people how to ride horses, but at the same time, they teach them godly character, preach to them, and work with them, and a number of different programs they have there. Well, I was there back in February or early March, and so the camp wasn't in session at the time, but being that it's a working ranch, there's still a lot of work to do there. And so one day I was just out taking a few pictures, and as I was wandering around, just to give you an idea, this is what the camp looked like, and just out in pretty much wilderness, just a nice open area, some beautiful scenery that was there, and some plain scenery. Just something, by the way, while I was there, the pastor took me out for a little tour. I wanted to just show you a picture there. While we were out, the pastor took me out. We were just doing some climbing around, and there's a dinosaur footprint that he showed me. And just in case you didn't know, of course, that's 13 million years old, right? Or 70 million years. No, that's probably no more than 5,000 years old. And despite all the evidence that points to the fact that it's probably only a few thousand years old, scientists refuse to believe that. That's only a few thousand years old there. But it was interesting to go and take a look at it and see what is left of one of God's creations. But as I was on the ranch, I was just walking around taking some pictures. I had a chance to start talking with this fellow here. His name is Bob Toomer. And Bob is a horse trainer. He's one of the men who work there on the ranch. And he also trains the horses for the ranch. Does a lot of work for that. And so I was just taking some pictures originally, and then and saw Bob doing some work. And he was at the time helping a lady as she was training her horse. And so Bob is trained in the method. Some of you have heard of the horse whisperer, and maybe have seen something about the horse whisperer. Well, he is trained in that method and knows how to break in a horse. Maybe some of you are familiar with the old style of doing it, where sometimes it could get a little brutal, and as they were trying to really break a horse's will. Well, that's not his desire so much to break its will as much as make the horse usable. And so I was watching him and said, well, if you do that anymore this week, let me know. I want to get some pictures and I want to watch it. Well, Bob, being a Christian and being a preacher, often travels around and does lessons on this. And he teaches principles as he is breaking in a horse, some of the things. He taught me a lot, so I want to try and share some of that with you tonight as we go through this. And so as we were walking around, he first had just put a horse in, and a brand new horse in with a herd. And as you see here, sometimes the horses have disagreements. And I thought, well, that's sort of like a church. Somebody comes along and you're going to have disagreements in there. You're going to have some arguments and some fights among everybody until finally you learn to live with one another. And hopefully that's sooner than later, and real destruction happens in the church. But we were walking over, and Bob had to train a horse. Now, this horse was pretty much a completely unbroken horse. Had never really been worked with before. Not really, had really not been touched by people before. So this was really a wild horse. Now, as Bob began working with this horse, now, of course, let me just say, some people would say, well, this is cruelty. Why don't we just let the horses be? Why don't we just let them out there? Just let them alone, out in the wilderness, just let them alone, and let them be horses. That's really not the best place for them. There's a number of principles. First off, God created those horses for us to use. And so as long as that horse is out in the wild, do you know that it's not being used to the greatest potential God wants it to be? It's completely unusable. It will live its whole life and not accomplish anything meaningful as long as it's out in the wild. So Bob is really trying to train this horse to be useful, to accomplish something. And so that was the whole process here. He wants to make this horse usable. to have some kind of service. The other thing is, horses out in the wild are in a very dangerous situation. First off, nothing is protecting them out there. They might have their speed, but nothing is protecting them, certainly from the prey or from the wild beasts that are out there. But even more so, what happens when there's a drought? Nobody's going to bring hay to these horses normally, and I guess there's programs that do that kind of thing nowadays. But for the most part, if this is out in the wild and there's drought, nobody's helping this horse. The other thing is, while I was there, Bob had to work on, you got to put horseshoes on it, or you got to work at least with the hooves and shorten the hooves. And I was asking him a little bit about that, and he said, the problem with a lot of horses out in the wild is they don't have this happen. Now, some of them, just by process of elimination, the ones who have bad hooves just die. And so genetically, normally it's the one with good hooves that continue to live or will continue to breed. But if they have bad hooves, normally eventually they just go lame and they die because they can't go. And so he said, really, when we bring them in, we're the ones who take care of them. We know what's best for them. We know what we can do with them. So it's our desire to bring them in, to watch out for them. We're going to make sure they have food and water, that their needs are all met. And that is the goal. And so as I was watching this, I thought, this is really a picture of salvation happening here. He has to work with his horse. Now, the thing is, this horse doesn't realize that Bob's looking out for his interests. The horse is really thinking, I just want to leave. I want to go back out in the wilderness. I want to go live life any way I want to. That's really where I'll be happiest. That's what the horse thinks. And so it's trying to leave. So what Bob does is he brings it into what's called a round pen. And he brings his horse in here. And what Bob will start doing is just getting this horse run. He'll just start working this horse a little bit. And, of course, he has a lasso. And Bob's real good with a lasso, at least certainly in comparison to me. I don't think I could lasso a post with one. And he was doing all sorts of tricks with one. But he just starts swinging that lasso around. That horse has never seen a lasso before, so it wants to run. It wants to stay away from it. So that horse will start running around in circles. And all the while, Bob said, now you just watch this horse. Here's something to look for. He said, watch this horse's eyes. You see where he's looking? And all the while, the horse was looking outside the fence. His head was tilted that way. He was watching away because that's where he's always gotten his answers before, was out there in the wild somewhere. Bob says he needs to learn that I'm his answer. So Bob had that horse running, and he's just trying to run away from the problems. He's thinking, if I could just get away, life will be happy again. But he's back to all his old problems if he gets out there. Oh, he might be somewhat self-sufficient. He'll have his times of happiness, but he'll accomplish nothing with his life, and he'll miss the pleasure of being with the master. So Bob has that horse running, and he says, now watch. It's getting there. It's getting ready to submit to me. He's starting to realize his answers aren't out there. His answers are in here. And in just a moment, you're going to see this horse drop his head. Just for a moment, but the moment he drops his head, he's actually given me a signal. And he's telling me that he's ready to join up with me. So here's the horse running around, and certainly enough, at a certain point, wherever it was, all of a sudden that horse just dropped his head for a moment and brought it back up. And Bob said, that's all I needed to see. The horse just submitted to me. The horse just realized I'm the answer. It needs to turn to me. So Bob allowed that horse to stop running. And what Bob's doing here, he's not taking a break, but actually he's giving a signal back to the horse. He's telling the horse here, you're welcome to join up. I am inviting you to join my herd, to be a part with me, and I will take care of you. And so he is giving, and you see the horse is watching him. He's looking to see what's happening here. And so that's what's happening at this point. The horse has submitted to Bob. And now he's being invited into the herd. That is salvation. We try to run from God before we're saved. We try and think there's got to be other answers, whether it's, drugs, alcohol, sex, just living for ourselves, our own pleasures, just ourselves. I've got to have the answers. I've got to have happiness. And we could go our whole lives doing that. And we might get by. We might be moral. We might do the right things to some degree. But if we have not given ourselves to God, He is not our master. We are not a part of His herd. We're not going to heaven. We have to submit to Him. That is our only answer. And that's what Bob is doing here. He is welcoming that horse into his herd. Well, now that that's done, Bob can walk up to that horse. Now, just a few moments ago, Bob couldn't have walked up to that horse. If he walked up, put his hand out, that horse would have run away.